There are many Rastafari brethren and sisters who I know who do not smoke. They may use the cannabis in some way, shape, or form, maybe in cooking or making tea or some other form. They may, and it's not must that all do. So it's not like, oh, because you're a Rastafari, you have to. There's some who are not necessarily inclined to reggae music, but reggae music, I think, is a part of Rastafari because of the message in the music.
It was supposed to be humble. It was supposed to be a search for a deeper meaning. And this deeper meaning is not something that is hidden only in the church. It's in everywhere, wherever we go as human beings. We are conscious of the fact that we do not know it all. We do not have all the answers.
We have a lot of these traditional remedies. Why aren't we having our people who go out to study to become doctors and so on? Why don't we have them also study our traditional medicine and get equipped with that sort of knowledge so that they could bring it back to our communities and use it, instead of just focusing on going out to be a medicinal doctor in the pharmaceutical side of things? My name is Yahsonn Tafari. I am originally, I was born on a tiny island in the Caribbean known as Nevis. Nevis is one of the two islands that form a twin island federation that's known as St. Kitts and Nevis. So Nevis is the smaller of the two islands. So Nevis is actually just 36 square miles with a population of about 12,000 people, which probably might just be a little village in some one of your communities in Africa. So I am originally from a very small, community where almost everybody knows everybody. Eventually I attended primary school, secondary school on the island. Eventually left school, got into a bit of mechanic. I started to learn my trade as a mechanic, and eventually then got into education, got into teaching. I taught for about 15 years. In the latter part of my teaching career, I taught at the primary level and at the secondary level. And at the latter part, I focused on the secondary with agricultural science and social studies as the two main subjects that I taught then. Agricultural science was more of, I guess I would say more of my passion. I had more passion. I found more of my passion settled with nature. And so I zoomed in more on agricultural science. And eventually, after resigning, I got involved in a huge farming project, farm to table hotel venture that started on St. Kitts, the sister island. And so I eventually relocated to St. Kitts, started my venture in that field, and did that for a couple of years. Things didn't go as planned there with the project, and so they made some changes, and as a result, my position was made redundant. I then moved on to starting my own, one of my entrepreneurial ventures. I started an Uber-like service on the island, and then I got an opportunity to take on a project in Canada, which was a training in the cannabis sector, which I was very much interested in, and I took that on. And now I'm in California, furthering a bit more, not so much on the cannabis side, but on the agro processing side, because that's one of my true passions and belief that, especially for us in the Caribbean, and I'm seeing that also with our African brothers and sisters, that is an area that we really need to focus on and zoom in on, especially for agriculture, not just growing the raw produce and seeking to get funds from the raw produce, but to take the raw produce and turn it into value added, products that can be much more beneficial to people and also bring in more revenue for the farmers as well.
Thank you so much for that. That is an interesting conversation, and I'm sure that we're going to have an important conversation today relating to agriculture. And of course, what you do, you did touch some important things there, including, of course, your training or training people about cannabis, then also agriculture. But now you are focusing more on agriculture, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, let's start like this. Why are you passionate about agriculture? What is your love for agriculture? Tell me about that.
In the Caribbean, I guess back in the 70s, 80s, it wasn't like it is today. Modern technology wasn't as prevalent. As youth, we didn't have a lot of the things that we now take for granted. And so a lot of our parents, they did some form of subsistence farming to help, grow us. And so I grew up with my parents having, and my grandparents as well. My grandparents having, I remember my grandmother, she had her own chickens, she had sheep, she had goats, she had pigs. And, this played a role in her being able to deal with the challenges of life at that time. Most of those, like my grandmother, she had 12 children, right? So having to deal with that. This is how they were able to use their skills, their knowledge, and the way life was to be able to do that. So she had her chickens, she got her eggs, and sometimes she would actually kill some of the chickens and have that for meals. Same thing with the sheep and the goats, and the same thing with the pigs. My mom, she took on a bit of that, and my grandmother also, she was also into the processing side of it, like making tarts and sugar cake and peppermint and a local drink that is made from roots. We call it sarsaparilla. So she was very, very, very good at this. And so I grew up seeing a lot of this around me, but taking it for granted. Fast forward, my mom, she was very much into flowers or ornamentals. My dad, he continued that subsistence life where he had animals as well. And, he did a little garden. So I would have always had that a part of my life, even though they were more focused on getting us to zoom in on the academics. I found that, yes, I was able to deal with the academics. The academics is not necessarily a challenge for me, but I found that I had more of a love for doing tangible things, like working with my hands, which I eventually, as an educator, I realized that is also something that we need addressing in our Caribbean and African communities as well, because we don't necessarily pay as much attention to vocational training, and we look down on people who do some of these things. So I had that interest. Got out of school and like I said, got into mechanics. I really at one point really thought about just going to the hills and living from the land. I think maybe more so my early what should I call it? Earlier convictions towards the Rastafari movement might have helped a lot in that regards, because Rastafari, one of their practices is eating from the land, self-sustenance, things like that. And so I think that helped me to gravitate towards paying attention to what I am eating and where what I am eating is coming from. And I think that is part of what captured the passion for me very early.
Well, the last one that you made mention of, maybe we might just spend a few seconds there, which is the Rastafarian life and the idea and the philosophy. Of course, coming from Jamaica now, of course, there is no way we can forget two important personalities. These are not the only people in Jamaica, but of course, they have imparted on in a number of ways. Even though we have never been to Jamaica, so I'm talking of Marcus Garvey. I'm talking of also Bob Marley. Okay, let's leave Marcus Garvey. We will come to him maybe later, because we're going to be talking about our African identity, talking about our roots. So there is no way we can avoid talking about Marcus Garvey, even that. So tell me a little bit about the Rastafari movement. Were you into that? How much were you into that? Tell me about that.
Rastafari, I think I got a very early introduction to Rastafari. Now, Rastafari originated out of Jamaica. Most of the other islands in the Caribbean would have been influenced by the Rastafari movement. It's Rastafari, to me, took on an extension of the Pan-African movement, that movement towards, trying to find our roots and learning more about ourselves and seeking to get back to our roots and culture. So I think I had a very early, move towards that. When I was growing up, my father loved music, and so he in the house he would have, he always have big speakers and a big sound system. He loved a lot of country and western. He would play some soca music in between, but he loved also really serious, conscious roots reggae music. And so very early in my life, when he gets fed up of maybe listening to the country and western, he would change and put in some reggae music. And that was the music that really captivated me. So he would have, things like Bob Marley, Peter Tosh, Burning Spear, Gregory Isaacs, Beres Hammond, and, some of these elder veterans. And then I found, okay, let me go back a little bit. Early in my life, very early in my life, I had a deep connection with the Bible and Bible stories. So very young, when most children would want toys and stuff at Christmas, my mom had to buy me a Bible story book. That's what I wanted. And so I grew up with that sort of biblical, religious, like just naturally a part of me without any per se, in indoctrination from my parents or forced by my parents to go to church or to accept that. It was something that was a part of me. However, no, so this is why I got back to that, because after started to listening to reggae music now, I found that some of the things that I heard some of these guys say in the lyrics, because it still takes a bit to understand the lyrics, because one, they're speaking, most of the time they sing in a Jamaican patois. So you first have to understand the patois and then understand some of the common phrases and terms that they use in order to be able to understand, to better really understand the lyrics. However, in listening to the lyrics and understanding the lyrics, I found that some of it, especially from the roots Rastafari side, conflicted a bit of some of what I was learning, or made me go and research some more of what I would have been read and what I would have read and would have been taught going to church and so on, because my parents made sure that, I went to church and all that. So I was all involved in the church growing up as well. And that is where it started for me. So listening to the music caused me to start to do some research and so on. It is not something that is and was accepted by my parents, as most people then associate, Rastafari with cannabis and that criminalized Rastafari, and then people added all kind of other things, make it seem as if Rastafari was so bad and terrible and so on, because we opposed the system that governed us, so to speak. And so it was a journey. So I got captivated and I continued to do the research. And then as I got older, I just got more into researching it and being engrossed in the life of Rastafari. So yes, I got involved, and it is in my recollection, it's like I would say has been a part of my life ever since. It's just that I found out about it, I discovered more about it as I grew into it.
All right, that's interesting. And of course, being a person who is very interested in story and storytelling, actually, the art of storytelling, it is important that we know also about those things. All right, first, you say you did the research because now you were hearing something that the Rastafarians are saying in their music, no? Because the music, there are messages usually buried in it, no? There are different layers of messages that are hidden in it. Because it's a cultural element. So you went to do your own digging because now you understand a part of the Christian part, which of course you said quite right, that you did it willingly, which is fine also. But when you did your research, what did you find? What was your conclusion at the end of the day?
Interestingly, my research took me along a very long path, and I would say at this point that I'm not sure if my research has ended. I think I am still researching on the journey. However, in relation to Rastafari and what I would have discovered along the journey, it caused me to not just research Rastafari. It caused me to also research many other religions. So I looked at, Judaism. I looked at a bit of Buddhism, Islam, and Hinduism and so on. And what I ended up discovering, so to speak, is seemingly there's an element of truth in almost all of the religions, or in all of the different religions that exist. And from Rastafari, the basis of Rastafari is Haile Selassie, and Haile Selassie was Rastafari. So I know some people claim, they are Rastafari, but don't necessarily accept Haile Selassie. But to me, that doesn't make sense because the name Rastafari was Haile Selassie. So Haile Selassie, in one of his writings or speeches, spoke to religion and spirituality. And I think his rationale and explanation helped me a lot in terms of, I guess, better understanding myself and the journey and the path that I was on the journey. In that speech, to summarize or to paraphrase, what I gathered from what he highlighted in that bit of documentation is that religion is sort of like a vehicle that leads one to spirituality, and spirituality is the end goal or the ultimate goal. So I liken it to this example by saying, okay, spirituality is the top of the mountain. Let's say Kilimanjaro mountain. The objective is to get to the top of the mountain. So whether it is Christianity, whether it is Islam, whether it is Hinduism, or whatever religion you may use, that is just the vehicle that gets you to that ultimate goal. So that is what I have gathered. So at the end of it, I don't necessarily seek to disrespect or diminish anybody for whatever they believe or what they may choose to practice, as long as if it gets you to that point where you could understand all of us, are one, and you practice the you respect each other, you love each other, you genuine, because all religions basically have these things. They may differ in some of their different practices and what they may believe and so on, but that's it. So for me, if you reach that goal, if whatever takes you there to that ultimate point, I respect that.
That's very interesting. That is something that is actually missing from the mainstream religion of if we were to really say that that at the end of the day, it was supposed to be humble. It was supposed to be a search for a deeper meaning. This deeper meaning is not something that is hidden only in the church. Is in everywhere, wherever we go as human beings, we are conscious of the fact that we do not know it all. We do not have all the answers. But of course, saying that you do not have all the answer now take a lot of maturity on your part to say, oh, as a human being, despite what I've studied, despite what I've done in life, I still do not know all. I am still open to learn. I'm still open to find out. I'm still open to collaborate with others. This is something that is missing in many
especially
religions. Please go.
Especially on the religious side. And that's one of the reasons why I don't necessarily seek to engage a lot of debates and arguments, because I think people are very emotional and passionate, and rightly so, where their belief is concerned, because everybody is entitled to their belief. However, one of the things that I found on the journey is that Christianity, especially Western Christianity, seeks to, I guess, most of what is practiced for me, coming from the Caribbean, how we were Christianized, and I know many other territories, would have had that similar type of, religious indoctrination. Christianity, Western Christianity, kind of seeks to limit individuals to, because most of those religions, most of them, the different denomination, teaches you to believe in what they're telling you, and anything outside of what they're teaching is deemed blasphemous, and they play the blood of Jesus on it and all that. So you find that a lot of people who become involved or engrossed in that form of Christianity do not find themselves open enough to hear or even entertain anything outside of that realm. So me having that open-mindedness from pretty early in my life, I guess it kind of caused me to look at things differently. So for example, on the journey, when I started to look at a bit of Islam, I begin to realize on the journey that Islam and Christianity, from a historical point of view and a biblical point of view, are literally blood brothers, because according to the historical account, Islam started out from Ishmael, which would have been also the son of Abraham, who he would have gotten through the handmaiden, because if you go back to the biblical story, it says that Sarai, who became Sarah, was unable to give birth, and she allowed Abraham to go in with the handmaiden and got Ishmael. After, she was able to get pregnant and she got Isaac. So Ishmael was then sent off, and Abraham gave him and his nation his blessing, so that he would have become a nation and all that. And then Isaac, who then got Esau and Jacob, and then that story started from there. So, you begin to realize that, well, they are literally blood brothers, but we have it seemingly that they are enemies. You start to read the Quran, and you realize the main difference that is there is that Islam don't necessarily see Yeshua, who is called Jesus, as the only son of God. They just see him as another prophet. So it's not that they don't recognize him, it's just that they don't see him the way that Christianity does. And so, like I said, I was able to, open my mind a bit, and then to recognize that Judaism, is like the father of Christianity, So then when you start to see the connection, you start to recognize, man, like, why do they, what plot is this to try to limit me and hold me into this box where I should just think about these things and know these things and don't even try to entertain anything outside of that. I found that not something that I that sit comfortable with me. So I continue the spiritual journey. So that's why I say it's not done for me, because with all that research, I'm still learning more as my life continues.
And I think that is really interesting. It takes humility to say that, no? And that need to be celebrated. Now, looking at the historical account that you give, though we really find it difficult to say whether it's actually historical, what is written in the Bible, whether that is actually historical is something completely different. But because there is a document, which is the Bible, we can look at what is written. In this sense, we can see that we're actually talking of brother coming from the same parents. Yet, we see that they are not really the cause of the confusion. I must admit that. Jesus and Muhammad are not the cause of the confusion that we have. Okay, by confusion, I mean the millions of people that have died. These are historical facts. These have really happened. For example, for over 200 years, the European and the Arab will be involved in what is known as the Crusade. So this led to a lot of death. And who is responsible for this? We don't want to blame it on Jesus or Muhammad. We simply need to blame it on our ignorance, our inability to understand the simple arithmetic of life that we are supposed to learn. But we have refused to learn. Even today, to date, we still have a lot of people that are so angered. If you call them to reason, they don't want to reason. They have given their sense of reasoning to institution, to dogma. Therefore, what they have is a prepared argument for them that they just need to defend. They don't reason beyond that, and that is unfortunate.
Well, isn't it a part of the plan? Because
absolutely,
you see, like we have to understand that, you know, coming out of the enslavement and colonization era, there was and is a concerted effort to still control. So though the shackles were removed from the hands and the feet, the only way that control could continue or be perpetuated is by seeking to control the mental. And so you find a lot of things that we should know. And I think when you look at the fact that it was the missionaries who brought in that form of Christianity and how it was used, and us knowing that we were originally a spiritual people, religion, it's not that religion is necessarily bad, but how it was used and what it was used for may have some questions. And as a result of that, you know, we still have a lot of things that we argue about because of this book, this collection of books, and a lot of misconception. For example, like today, we still have people who are at present supporting what's going on and in the Gaza area, because from a religious standpoint, they are believing in, you know, this Israel and, you know, it's God's land and it's God's people and all that, when the reality is that is a whole different story altogether, because those people who are presently on that landmass do not represent the biblical Israelites. These people are, as you would hear them be referred to as Israeli and Israelians. Israeli and Israelians are citizens of the modern day state of Israel. They have absolutely nothing to do with the biblical Israelites, who are descendants of a man who was known as Israel and who got 12 sons and a daughter. And his 12 sons became the nation of Israel. And so you have these misconceptions that are still perpetuated by even scholars and top, intellectual people. Then you have things like, people still saying, people still referring to Queen Makeda as Queen Sheba, not necessarily recognizing that Sheba was actually a place and she was a queen of that place. And you still have today, like you look at big, screen movies and so on, and they're talking about Queen Sheba. So a lot of these misconceptions, to me personally, are continued and perpetuated to continue that mental, control, so that we always think and look at things in a particular way, or they are able to control the narrative and give you what they want you, to see, or see the perspective they want you to see it from.
Absolutely. And that is why we continuously stress here that people should learn how stories are constructed, learn how what you are reading actually was created. Because if you know how that happened, then you can deconstruct it and reconstruct it if you want, or create something different from that. The idea that God sent even the Ten Commandments to a man called Moses would not make any sense, except, of course, you are so ignorant of history. Because if you know history and geography, you understand that Moses, as a child, actually grew up in Egypt. So if God is going to give Moses something, he would have given him something different from Egypt. But we see now that the Ten Commandments that was given to Moses in Mount Sinai is nothing more than what Moses had already learned in school, because he grew up in Egypt. The Ten Commandments is not the whole law. That is actually part of the law. They are called they are the negative confession. This
precepts of man.
Yeah. Actually, these are the law that the Egyptians had been practicing before Moses was born. It doesn't make any sense, because this is a copy that is already existing. So God, who knows everything, whether copy what is already existing and give it to you as the law, come on, what are we talking about? But if we don't know how the history are configured, then we find it difficult to understand. But if you understand what we are talking about here, that we're looking at a people who have been living long before the intruders, then it wouldn't be confusing for you. Every child growing up in Egypt know about the negative confession. So that you went to the mountain to bring it, anyway, of course, if you are talking to ignorant people, that would make sense. All right, now, let's talk about Rastafarian. For people who do not know what is Rastafari really mean, because now this is something that have happened a couple of years ago, and as we move on, stories fade. Some people even lose track of what has happened a couple of days ago. So to those who don't understand what that means, that movement, that idea, that ideology, what it was supposed to represent, what would you say?
I think Rastafari, to sum it up, I would say it's a cultural movement with a spiritual nucleus. I think my brother Muta Baruka would have summed it up in that way, and I think that's one of the better way to describe it, or to summarize it, because that's the basis of it. Rastafari stemmed from the struggles and oppression of a people who found themselves in a scenario where they were taken from their heritage. Everything was stripped away, like in our case, right now we're here and we're speaking in British language. We're using English, which is the language of the British, and this is just a part of the legacy of what they left, because they stripped us. Like for us in the Caribbean, you guys are fortunate in the sense that you guys got colonized on your landmass, and so a lot of your culture and cultural practices and all that still remained, but a lot of us in the Caribbean know and feel, and in some cases if you were to come to the Caribbean, you would see and feel evidence of things that we may do and practice that might still be, of African heritage, but we don't even know, because so much have been taken from us, the religion, the way of life. So Rastafari would have struggled, through the years to seek to maintain that African connection and seeking. So, two of the major tenets of Rastafari is reparation and repatriation. But Haile Selassie and the coronation of Haile Selassie in Ethiopia played a very significant role in terms of, I guess, the development of Rastafari. The part of the story stems from Marcus Garvey at some point, in his time, prophesied that, we should utilizing, some of the scriptural teachings to look to the east for the coming of the king. And during that time when he was talking about that was the time when Haile Selassie got coronated in Ethiopia. And so it was then deemed, well, this is, what we should be looking forward to. There's some who try to use biblical claims to connect Haile Selassie to the Solomonic dynasty, and there's actually some history in Ethiopia via the book that's called, I think, the Nebra Kenas, where it speaks to the glory of the kings of Ethiopia, and it's said that Haile Selassie is a descendant of King Solomon. He is the 225th king to sit upon that throne, and so there's some who use that biblical connection. However, after Marcus Garvey would have made, such a decree, I think there was this brother, Leonard P. Howell, who is deemed as the father of Rastafari, even though I guess there would have been other brothers who at that time would have been very instrumental as well, but he was the one who got most of the credence for standing up and going through the fight and the struggle, and started that movement. Said, well, let's look at this. And then there was a point where Haile Selassie on his worldwide trips visited Jamaica, and that in itself also helped to cement the Rastafari movement. And so Haile Selassie is deemed as one of the most sacred or revered figures within the Rastafari movement. So some consider him as the Most High. Some see him as Christ returning his kingly character, and some just see him as that powerful figure that stood up within that time and was able to fulfill certain prophecies. Some who would have subscribed to biblical scriptures. So, like, for example, some would claim that he would have judged the earth or judged the world, passed judgment on the world, when he would have addressed the League of Nations, which eventually got damaged, got dismantled, and then eventually went back and speak to the United Nations in regards to even some of the things that we see happening today in regards to a smaller country being aggressed by a bigger country, and then you would have had agreements signed that this should not happen, and if it does happen, what the other nations would do, which they did not. And so it was deemed then that Haile Selassie did that. He was also considered King of Kings and the highest in the world, when it was recognized also that 72 nations came at his coronation and bowed down and accepted Haile Selassie coronated as King of Kings, Lord of Lords, conquering Lion of the tribe of Judah, elect of Jah, light of the world, and all of these titles that was only ever given to one other person that, according to biblical history, walked the earth, Yeshua, who got those titles. So out of that, you'd have had, like I said, that cultural revolution with a spiritual nucleus. So there was always that revolution in regards to rebelling the British or colonial system or the oppressive, slave master system, coupled now with that knowledge now of connecting us to righteousness and to spirituality, and recognizing now that the Bible is not just written about, because most of the time you would have seen pictures of these European people and so on. Now you start to realize now that you can connect yourself to that history. I think it gave a lot more strength and empowerment and encouragement to the people. And so as a result, you got out of that people abstaining from meat. So within Rastafari, it's most Rastafari don't eat any form of meat at all. There's some who may eat fish, but mainly it's a vegan, what you call vegan, but we call it ITAL lifestyle. It's about, connecting with Africa, seeking to make connections with Africa. Haile Selassie, as a matter of fact, I think right now there is some issue in Ethiopia where that is concerned, but Haile Selassie, when he was around, he set aside a portion of land in Shashamani in Ethiopia for brothers and sisters in the diaspora who desire of repatriation to come back to Africa. I think there's some issues right now where that is concerned, because a lot of brothers around the world and sisters would have taken up that offer. They are in Ethiopia, have a community there. I think there's some issues in terms of whether they could get rights and what they can do in Ethiopia and so on, because now that type of governance is not there anymore. You don't have a monarchy anymore. It's a different type of governing system, and so there's some issues. But that's in a nutshell, basically, with that, then you can't eliminate the reggae music, which was the vehicle that was used to get the message across, because Rastafari, the struggle is real. We were oppressed, and I usually say to people who say that the transatlantic slave trade is the worst form of atrocities meted out to people in the world, I tend to say that it's Rastafari. My rationale for saying that is that the same people who went through that transatlantic slave trade issue and who went through all of that oppression were the same people who opposed Rastafari. So Rastafari's oppression was worse because it wasn't so much the enslavers or the Europeans who were fighting Rastafari. Rastafari was fought from amongst their own people. And so I found that was, very tough. Like, there was a point in Dominica, you might not know this history, but in Dominica, they had what was considered the Dread Act, where you could have shot a Rastaman on sight. You could have just seen a Rastafari. He didn't do anything. He didn't have to do anything. He didn't have to be accused of anything. You have a licensed weapon, you shoot him, and it would just be like shooting a dog or shooting a cat. So in the early 60s, 70s, many Rastafari eventually had to run into the mountains and hide. And now in Jamaica, there was a move like that as well. The same guy who I mentioned, Leonard P. Howell, he started a community. He bought some lands and he started a community where those who were following him, so to speak, the Rastafari brothers and sisters, they were allowed to live on his land, set up houses. They, had schools. They had different skills that they were into, whether it's construction, carpentry, and so on. And everybody in the society, and they were building a community that threatened the status quo, because the government now felt threatened that if these guys here, get through with this, then it would cause more people to gravitate towards them, and then they would not pay much attention to us as authority. They would look at, that Rastafari community. And so they dismantled that community. So over the years, Rastafari, would have been ridiculed and scorned by community, and then criminalized using cannabis. So I think it's one of the only spiritual or religious practices in all parts of the world that uses cannabis as a sacrament, so to speak. So cannabis is used within Rastafari as a form of aiding meditation and getting into different levels of spiritualities. Like in some other religion, they use other herbs and mushrooms and different things and so on. Psychedelics, they would call it. So when they criminalized cannabis, when they made cannabis illegal, and knowing that Rastafari used cannabis, that was the only thing, so to speak. So you beat down Rastafari, you look for them in the hills, and you capture them, claiming that they're criminals. Because now, if you're caught with cannabis, even if it was a little joint, you would have a criminal record. So you became a criminal. It's not that you did anything, rape anybody or steal from anybody or anything like that. So that was part of the challenge and the struggle. So right now, we are seeing a bit of relaxation where certain things, are going. Most people are getting a bit more health conscious. They still don't want to give Rastafari the credence, so they call it vegan. They don't, associate it with Ita living, even though we were living that way. The cannabis, we have been saying that all along, that it was a lie. Cannabis, there's no evidence that cannabis has caused any death to anyone. And as a matter of fact, the basis for criminalizing cannabis is a lie, a blatant lie. Because if you look at cannabis, it is categorized as a Schedule 1 drug. Schedule 1 drug states that it's a substance or chemical that is deemed to have no accepted medicinal use or purpose. So that is the premise that cannabis is criminalized under. It is criminalized under the premise that it is a chemical or a substance that is deemed to have no accepted medicinal use or purpose. However, the premise they're using to decriminalize it and not legalize it, but only decriminalize it, is that it has medicinal use or purpose. So if it has medicinal use or purpose, but you criminalize it, claiming that it has no medicinal use or purpose, then that's blatant hypocrisy, a blatant lie. So even from the scriptural side, when you talk about dealing with, there's a scripture that talks about dealing with spiritual wickedness in high and low places. Well, I find that is a perfect example of spiritual wickedness in high places, because here is it that even when you look at the substances, if you're supposed to go and look at the substances that are in the category as a Schedule 1 drug, cannabis would look like an orange in a box of red apples, because all of the other substances are chemicals, yes, but cannabis is the only plant that is in that category as a Schedule 1 drug. So you can see that it was intentional that they sought to drop it in there and continue to perpetuate that lie, using their forces and authority to manufacture the lie and enforce it, using all forms of authority, all these years. And even now it reaches to the point where they recognize, okay, we can't continue with this lie anymore. Even at this point, that they have decriminalized in a lot of states in America and a lot of different places around the world, it is still on the books as a Schedule 1 drug, and they are now presently going through negotiations and debates to reschedule it as we speak.
Actually, anyway, we'll come back to cannabis just now, because I have a couple of questions to ask you there. Now, let's talk a bit about the Rastafari movement. What was the practical objective that it was supposed to achieve at the end of the day? And what is the state of the movement as we currently talk? This is 2024.
From what I gather, the objective mainly is to decolonize the mind, decolonize the mind, decolonize the brain, and get our people back to that Afrocentric consciousness that we crave for. Because, I guess it would have been different for the Africans who are living in Africa. Like I said, you guys were colonized, yes, in a lot of cases. Ethiopia and I think Liberia is the only two territories that were not necessarily colonized by someone of the European territories. However, the difference is for you guys still were able to, though colonize, were still able to maintain a lot of your cultural practices and a lot of your languages and different things. In the Caribbean, a lot of that was lost and beaten out of you in some cases. You think of, you look at the movie Roots and you see, Kunta Kinte, what they did with Kunta Kinte, right? Similar experiences in the Caribbean. So and then the language was taught using religion. So it was the missionaries who came in and began teaching their form of Christianity using the Bible. And the Bible is what they use to teach us the English language. So the indoctrination really ran deep, real deep. And so in that regards, if Rastafari, to say that Rastafari, the objective has been achieved, I think a lot of people in the region over the years have benefited from the teachings of Rastafari. I think it has done a lot to help to open the consciousness of people and get people to really see a different perspective. Because the thing is, even though they were fought for so many years, after given the opportunity to be a part of society, or accepted, so to speak, within the community, I think a lot of changes were made mentally. Like, for example, even myself, I happen to be, in my case, the first Rastafari educator or teacher in my island, or on my island. Now, that was very far-fetched for most people, because of how Rastafari was treated in our societies. It was not accepted, and I had a lot of struggles in terms of achieving that as well. Even though I had the qualifications, the mindset of the people was still, we can't have he coming in the school teaching our children. What he can teach them? He teach them how to smoke cannabis. He can teach, what I mean? And these kind of, and teaching about going back to Africa, and that not recognizing and realizing. So I had to challenge those things and say, well, look, can't a Jehovah's Witness teach? Can't a Muslim teach? What does my religion has to do with my ability or inability to impart information? Because you're putting me there to teach English, maths, language, science, social studies. Religion is not a part of the curriculum. So how could you judge me based on my religion and try to deny me of an opportunity to do what I can do based on your personal biases? And so these were some of the things that we had to deal with. The music has influenced a lot. And so reggae music, which is, originally Rastafari music, look at where we are today. One of the biggest movies right now is the One Love Bob Marley, movie. So it has done a lot in terms of influencing the people and, awakening the consciousness. Has it fulfilled all of what it should? I don't think so. And I think right now, the movement, in my personal opinion, is not as strong and is not as vibrant as it should be and could be at this point.
I remember when you were talking before, you did make mention of, you did refer to music, the reggae music, as an instrument that is used in the Rastafari movement. Okay, now we also added another thing to it. Another thing that we're talking about now is the cannabis. So I don't know if there is, if you want to show me the connection between Rastafari movement, the usage of cannabis and the reggae music. Can we separate all of them? I mean, are there Rastafarians who do not practice reggae music, who do not do reggae music, who do not smoke, or who do not use cannabis? I'm trying to understand it from there.
Yes. there are many Rastafari brethren and sisters who I know who do not smoke. They may use the cannabis in some way, shape, or form, maybe in cooking or making tea or some other form. They may, and it's not must that all do. So it's not like, oh, because you're Rastafari you have to. There's some who are not necessarily inclined to reggae music, but reggae music I think is a part of Rastafari because of the message in the music. So when you go back to our history, right? But back on if you were to go back even through colonization time or enslavement time, the music has always been a part of our culture. And in the Caribbean, Calypso, which is now known as Calypso, Calypso was one of the forms of getting the message to the masses. So you found back then the Europeans, the planters, they would bring some of us who they realized maybe were very much, good with musical instruments and could dance and sing and so on. And they would use us to entertain them. And so when we got the opportunity to entertain, it was also a time to get messages across. So sometimes they would be singing things, and to them, it's entertainment, but at the same time, it was an opportunity to send some messages across to our brothers and sisters. And so you found that similarly, because Rastafari, like I pointed out, Rastafari went through, it's like an enslavement inside of enslavement, because Rastafari was persecuted not necessarily by enslavers, but were persecuted by those descendants of those who already went through that sort of oppressive system. They still opted to oppress their own people in the form of Rastafari. So Rastafari did not have a voice, so to speak, in terms of getting the messages across and expressing the experiences and the agony and the pain and the suffering that they were going through. And reggae music was the vehicle to get across those messages, to get to the public. So it became, the voice of the voiceless, in our community. The connection with cannabis is, from what I've gathered historically, there was some early connection with the Africans and the Indians. Most of the Indians, I think, they were originally the users of the cannabis. I think they call it something else. And it is said that it is somewhere between that connection that the use of cannabis became prevalent. Using it more from a Rastafari perspective, it's, like I said, it's for meditation. And a lot of the reggae singers and writers and performers attribute a lot of their music and songs and their creative art form through the use of cannabis. Like whatever they experienced during that time caused them to whether just pen a song or just sing it or just perform it. And so that has always been a part of their spiritual, or our spiritual heights, or moving to that level. So it is, unlike many who think it is something that is used, to get high or as a drug. In Rastafari, as I know it, it's not necessarily used that way. So it's not necessarily used to get high or to get that, but it is known that it aids meditation and it aids your spiritual enlightenment. And so most times when you're going to get into what we would deem a meditation, where, maybe after doing some hard work or whatever you're doing, you sit back and you get some time to reflect, and you sit and roll a joint, or you might use the bong or the chalice, or chalice mostly in a gathering where they refer to it as the cup that was passed by Yeshua. They sat in 12 disciples and they all shared the chalice. So there's still that biblical and spiritual connection to Rastafari. It doesn't matter how you twist and turn it. So there's always that spiritual. So it's more of a spiritual component than a lot of the physical attributes that people tend to attach to it. Whether it's the red, green, and gold, which is the maintenance of the African colors, the vital food, the dressing. Most of the time we don't necessarily tend to follow too much of the Western clothing and so on. So you found that Rastafari early would have been the ones who started to try to wear African attire and getting African cloth and making their clothes and so on, really looking different and really seeking to get that connection with Africa. So there's always that seeking to connect, making that connect with Africa.
All right. I have a curiosity relating to cannabis as a plant. I look at it as a plant. If it is a plant, where is it coming from? What is the origin?
The creator, just how all the other plants were created, just a plant, just like the other plants that were created, and it continues to grow. The problem is some folks have opted to demonize that plant and make it seem as if it's one of the worst plants in the world. Nothing is absolutely wrong with the plant. The plant grows and can be used in so many ways. That's one of the interesting things that I find as I do the research on cannabis. The plant could be used for so many things. However, many opt to limit the arguments and the debates to the smoking and the possible issues surrounding the smoking of the plant. Now, if you're supposed to just take out the smoking component, there are a million other ways that you can use cannabis. Cannabis is nutritional. Cannabis can be used to make clothes. It can be used to make rope. It can be used to make houses. It can be used to fuel your cars. It can be used to do so many other things. However, we don't get to discuss or engage in some of these discussions because most of the time people try to limit the debate and the discussion towards smoking. And so when it's not how it affects you personally, and you can get lung cancer and you can get all of these things, or it is, what about children? Would you smoke it in front of children, and how it if it affects children and all of these things. But these issues are just issues, you could put it on the health side of things. But there's still arguments that even on that health side, where cigarettes is a product that's smoked. Now, you find that there's evidence to show that cigarettes are dangerous to humans, and there are evidence of deaths caused by tobacco use. As a matter of fact, they went to as far as at one point they made the manufacturers of cigarettes to put on the boxes that cigarette smoking is dangerous to your health. They have gotten to the point now where they force them to put that cigarette smoking kills. So they have evidence that it kills, but they're still putting it on the shelf and it's still sold in the communities. And nobody's really making a big issue over cigarettes and how dangerous it is for, There's no evidence that anybody has ever died from smoking cannabis. No, absolutely no historical evidence of that. So those other little arguments, to me, I find is petty and used to stray away from all of the other positive things. Because like I said, only a small fraction of the persons in the world smoke cannabis. There are many who use it in many different ways, and it could be used in many different ways. But because it is criminalized, a lot of these things were never gotten to come to fruition, because you couldn't do anything with it because it is deemed criminal.
I'm still interested in learning more about where the cannabis is coming from, or where it is mostly planted. Is it a plant that is mostly, in Africa, in South America, in Europe, or does it grow anywhere? if it grows anywhere, is it consumed in all culture or only in a particular culture? I'm trying to understand why certain people are being singled out for the usage, because I see there are some people here in Europe who use it too. But I'm trying to really understand, is it a plant that grows everywhere? Is it consumed across all culture? Help me understand that.
Okay, yes, it can be grown anywhere basically. It's one of the it's very a hardy it's a hardy plant. You can go, and very much in the tropical region. It's very good, and in Africa, in the Caribbean. No, like I was pointing out in terms of the categorization of cannabis. Now let's think back, and this is why history, I guess, is also important, right? Because prior to 1937, when there was this um, prohibition move in America to prohibit cannabis, cannabis was a plant widely used by nations. It was never a major issue. If you go back in history, it is documented in Chinese history that cannabis was used from way back in BC. Um, in um, there's also a claim that in which is going to be interesting now for the Christian people. In the Bible, the oil, the anointing oil that was used by Yeshua, who is called Jesus, is said to be one of the ingredients of it was cannabism. And if you look up cannabism, it actually refers to cannabis. So, which means that one of the ingredients in the healing oil that was used, the ointment that was used back then to heal people and so on, was cannabis. So it is not something that's new. What is new is the brainwashing and indoctrination and all of the things that was used in an effort to criminalize cannabis. And that is why you would get that view when you look around Europe and other places and so on, and how it seems as if that it's only a certain group of people who are marginalized. Now, if when you do some research, there's research in terms of cannabis and the hemp industry in America. I think there's one that's called Hemp Revolution, which is something that you could probably look at. Ancient video that speaks to the history of cannabis and how it got up to prohibition and what was done in an effort of prohibition. So to criminalize cannabis, one of the arguments or some of the early arguments are very biased. It was claimed that the cannabis was widely used by the Mexicans and the black jazz players and musicians and so on back in early America. And what they found is that the 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 their Caucasian women were gravitating to a lot of these guys, and they were losing a lot of their women to these guys, and so it became a racial issue. So cannabis was sort of criminalized based on racial prejudices, and so you found in the drug war, cannabis was singled out mainly because it was widely used by the black population. And you find a similar situation with cocaine and crack cocaine. So you find cocaine is widely used by the Europeans, the richer white guys who have the money and could afford it, and you realize there's less arrest and so on for that. But you find crack cocaine, which is a lower derivative that was created by mostly the black population, and they get arrested for that. And so you find, based on the prison system, and the prison system is a modern day slavery system in America, it is set to be able to get a lot more of the brothers locked in and get them in there to work free behind bars or work for next to nothing for the state. So a lot of this, that's a lot of what we see today in regards to cannabis and how things play out was a part of the plan that they would have had. So cannabis can go anywhere, and is something that we need to rewire our brains with in the Caribbean and in Africa in terms of how we thought about it because of what they programmed us to think. So it is very hard now for many of us because here is it after 1937 when it was actually made prohibited. A lot of efforts were done over those years after 1937 to make anybody who even begin to think about cannabis think that is something bad. And if you try to do anything, remember, army coming to kick down your door, police is coming to kick down your door 3, 4 in the morning in front of your children. So, even if, anybody else in the family might have been considering it, they'll be like, no, we don't want to associate with this. We don't want to have anything to do with this. So even though that is being decriminalized and people are recognizing that we could use it, you still have issues where people are still afraid because of that 80 plus years of indoctrination and lies, basically. Because like I pointed out earlier, it is based on a lie. So here is it, a blatant lie was sold and manufactured, and they used all of the authorities to ensure that that lie was not just sold in America. That lie was sold to the globe. And so Africa and all of these other territories who were looking forward to, getting help from America and so on, signed on to their drug Prohibition Act and their global drug prevention movement and so on, and started to also criminalize cannabis in their respective territories.
Thank you so much for that. You see, this is really an important conversation. Because like you pointed out, we can see a lot of people smoking all around, no? And you are right. In the advert of cigarette, the cigarette company usually will say, smoking is liable to die young. But it didn't really say you should not smoke. And they have a way of doing ad. And sometimes ad can either be direct or indirect. Because
yes,
if the ad you are doing is working against you, you will be out of business because you are paying money to create the ad or the advertisement or the publicity, as it were. No? So they are doing the indirect marketing of passing the message, and yet it's working. But if, like you are saying, of course, it's evidence that smoking actually is dangerous, and it is found everywhere. There are big companies that are into cigarette production and marketing and distribution. They don't have any problem. And there are no evidence of cannabis being dangerous. Because I was even hearing, I'm not an expert in this, that cannabis can actually be a cure for glaucoma, something like that, no? That yes. It's not really dangerous, but it's a medicine. It can cure you. Why? I find it difficult to understand why there is a lot of noise about it. And coming to think of that, this is a medicine coming from nature, but there are a lot of medicine actually in nature. I think if
you are getting it. I think you're getting it. You see, you say you couldn't understand why, but even today you recognize there's still that huge war between the pharmaceutical and the herbaceutical. So you find the pharmaceutical industry will do whatever it takes for you to not promote the herbs. Because if for example, you can tell a person, boy, you have this ailment, just go and eat some soursop. That means that that person is not going to go to the pharmacy to buy any drugs, and it means that he's not going to go to the doctor. So you find all of these things, they work together. So the fight for cannabis wasn't so much even on the smoking. Cannabis competed with a number of industries. Remember, in America, before 1937, when they prohibited cannabis, hemp, which is a strain of cannabis, and maybe people do not realize this, but hemp, there's a lot of crave around hemp because you have hemp seed, you have hemp powder, you have hemp this and hemp that. But hemp is a strain of cannabis. So like you have pepper, to simplify it, you have peppers, right? But you have seasoned pepper, you have bell peppers, and you have hot peppers, right? But they're all peppers. So cannabis, you have the indica cannabis, you have the sativa cannabis, and you also have hemp as a strain of cannabis. So if you were supposed to look at a hemp plant, it would take a trained eye to differentiate the hemp plant from a cannabis plant, just to give you the backdrop, right? And hemp was one of the widely used crop in America because at that time in history, ships were one of the most important vessels. At that time, the war wasn't so much in the air. The war was on the ground. And so ships were very vital. And many of the sails and the ropes that were made for the ships were made from hemp. And it is and was proven to be one of the strongest materials. So when they got back to, I think it was 1940 or 1941 or somewhere around, they had some kind of war or something in America. There was a point where even though they prohibited hemp, they made it illegal for citizens of America not to grow hemp. So they went back on their prohibition because they needed the hemp in order to get the sales and so on. So they made it a decree that people in America must grow hemp. So you have these historical accounts. So then you find the cannabis now fights against the petroleum industry as well, because you can get diesel and you can get fuel, ethanol, also from cannabis. You can get plastics from cannabis. So it competed with a lot of these industries. And then we're talking about from the nutritional side. Hemp seeds at this point is deemed to be one of the most protein-dense seeds. It has more proteins than chia, it has more proteins than flax seeds, and most of the other seeds that people who are trying to be vegan and so on use right now. In terms of omega-3 oils, it's one of the only set of seeds, plant-based, that you could get omega-3 and I think is omega-6 oils from. So you don't have to necessarily use cod liver oil or fish oil in order to get those oils. I think purslane is another plant that you can get that from as well. So you have the nutritional side of it, and then from the pharmaceutical side, cannabis is claimed to address a number of ailments, and so it was also a necessity for some of these industries to fight cannabis. So the fight for cannabis. So in answering that question, you can see why it is some of these reasons, but then they try to use the other reasons, or it's causing them to lose their women, and cannabis make paranoia and all of these things that they try to claim, giving a distraction to what they are doing, which is strategies that they still use today. Tell you something fancy to distract you from the realities of what they're doing. Like, for example, let me use a modern example. They came with facial recognition for security, and they tell you, nobody have nobody have the same eye and have the same facial shape and so on. So one of the best ways that you can secure your information on your device or whatever is if you use facial recognition, right, to open your phone or to close your phone or whatever. And that's the selling point that they gave you. But the other side to that is that they're creating a data-driven world where we are going to be similar to what's happening in China, where everybody will be monitored, and so depending on what you do, you could lose certain credit scores if you jaywalk, or if you didn't take out your trash and so on. You might not be able to drive on public transportation, or you might be banned from certain services and so on. So you get the good side of it, or the side that they want you to get, while you're distracted from the other things that they're doing behind the scenes.
Thank you so much for that. That is a very important point that you raised there, that we are beginning to get to, which is the point that the argument is not actually about the health risk for the consumer. It's purely economical. It's purely business,
Yes.
no? Now, this was, I think, in 1991, if I'm not mistaken, during the Gulf War. That was when, about the same period that Nigeria went to borrow money from IMF. This is particularly important. Of course, you will see that. It is important because IMF placed a condition for the loan that they were going to give to Nigeria, so that Nigeria was going to open up its economy, and which is really very interesting. Why not open up the economy? But this is the kick in it, is that you are opening up the economy, but what do you have to put into this economy? Nigeria only have oil to put into the economy, whereas opening up the economy, meaning you are allowing it to, you are basically making it available for any person to come into the economy and play. Now, if this was a game that was going to be playing in the interest of the Nigerian people, it would mean that the Nigerian government, okay, at this time we are still having military government, will make sure that Nigeria have a lot to put into the economy that they were opening up to the player. But it happened that they only have a kind of almost a mono economy because they have only oil to put in. Many other people that were coming in, the European and the American, of course, they need to dominate that market because they have a lot of products they were ready to put into the market. Most of these products were already subsidized by their government, which means they were going to dominate the market very easily. Now, many years later, what happened is that local production in Nigeria, local producers in Nigeria, Nigerian people who are producing goods and services to also compete in the market cannot even compete because they have government subsidized goods coming from Europe and America, and the Nigerian production is not subsidized by the Nigerian government. Now you are going to compete against these people in Nigeria that have become an open market. What do you think is going to happen? It's obvious. You are going to lose even in your own market. Now, what am I trying to say is that there is this very interesting agency that are coming into Africa and in many other parts of the world. They are telling us what is good to eat and what is not good to eat. What is good to eat for them is what they know that is good for them to eat and is good for them to sell. What is not good to eat is what they don't yet understand. But look at it. We didn't evolve in the same place. I am an African. I grew up with my culture. I understand how we rapport between our nature. I know what is going to work for me. Now I have abandoned that so that I can do what will be approved by the International Monetary Fund, by the United Nations, by the European government, which means I need to basically allow you to bring goods for me. I'm hungry, supply me rice from US. But what is going to happen to the local production in Nigeria, in Ivory Coast, in Ghana? They are going to slowly die off. Because we believe that what is coming from Europe is the real one. Gradually, they don't do it at once. They do it gradually. First, it starts with you are going to borrow money. They tell you this is a condition. Now, they make it so that you are not going to be able to pay the money, but you will take the condition they are going to give you. What are we talking about? We're talking about the consumption of cannabis, but let us just say cannabis. Let's talk about medicine. What is medicine? Medicine are those substances that you take to cure certain imbalances in your body. But is it true that only the industrial medicine that can work for you? It is not true. There is no evidence about that at all because the modern medicine is built up of traditional medicine. Because before we could develop the modern medicine, or maybe many people will call it Western medicine, actually is modern medicine. The medicine that are produced in the laboratory today. Because before modern medicine could be produced, we have been curing ourselves. We have been taking medicine before. I give an instance, a practical example. I grew up with my grandmother. I remember, for example, vividly, that when my grandmother was sick of fever, or any person in the family was sick of fever, she would go into the local forest. She would gather different types of leaves, different types of herbs. She will boil it, so that she will leave it to boil for like 2 days. I'm talking of village in Nigeria. And when they give you this medicine to drink, you drink it, your fever is over. Now, what are we going to tell people like my grandmother? That, well, no, that is not really working. You need to buy the medicine that is produced in the United States. Now, what if my mother medicine was giving her employment? Now she's now unemployed suddenly. But who's going to take care of her now? Nobody. You have lost. So it is not about the health of the people. It is about the economy. It's about the money. So, like you said, they are just using different strategies to make sure that they win. And they do it any way possible. Please go on.
But by any means necessary. You know, the thing is, the brainwashing or the brain bleaching in regards to our people has really been truly effective. And that is why you're seeing some of what is still being perpetuated. Sadly, it we have a lot of some people call them Oreo cookies who are in positions in that authority. So we say Oreo cookie because the Oreo is dark on the outside, but you have white in the middle, right? So you find a lot of people who find themselves in those positions, totally brainwashed and indoctrinated, and it's really hard not to when you're in a system that is set up to have you thinking that way, recognizing that you are given their language, you go to their churches, you go to their schools, and you go to their university further institutions, longer term education institutions. And so you're given what they want you to know. And so you'll function according to what they have given you. Now, I know in my territory, in my country, for example, St. Kitts and Nevis, Nevis was known, it was said that most of the men who were on Nevis were known to be male men or medicine men who came from Africa. So you find traditionally, as you speak, there are lots of herbal remedies and so on that were practiced. So as you talk about the bush tea and so on, that's how I grew up as well. My parents, they knew, and even today still know some of the herbs that they would use in order to take care of a fever, a cold, some that you need to use on the external. If you have a swollen foot or whatever, they have things that they will wrap around your foot and so on. And, so they knew these things. However, we have been told that there's no clinical research that is being done, so you can't give doses and all that, and so they use all of these. But I usually say, as you bring it down to money, because I always say, okay, look, we have a lot of these traditional remedies. Why aren't we having our people who go out to study to become doctors and so on? Why don't we have them also study our traditional medicine and get equipped with that sort of knowledge so that they could bring it back to our communities and use it, instead of just focusing on going out to be a medicinal doctor in the pharmaceutical side of things? And I think that's where we probably need to start, because at the same time, even in the pharmaceutical industries, they're taking advantage of a lot of the things that is on the herbal side as well. For example, here in America, I remember at one point I went into this store and I saw this product on the shelf, right? It was in capsule form, and it was in capsules, and it said graviola. Graviola, I think, yes, graviola is the correct name, the scientific name. But graviola is just the scientific name for soursop, what we know as soursop. But they didn't label it as soursop. They label it graviola. And so you'll be thinking, you're seeing this, and it's in the health side, and it's a supplement, and it's a superfood, and all that. And you would be like thinking that this is something that's, so. But then when I did the research, I realized, oh, but that's soursop. That's what we have back home that we take for granted. So, things like that. Moringa, they turn it into a capsule. It's a superfood. You can get the protein powder. You can, and they would sell you these things, and tell you, in some cases, oh, don't use these things. They don't have any research, any evidence to claim, to match the claims. But we, I think, have to, as a people, begin to empower ourselves. I think we are at this point now where we can't continue. We have recognized what the issues are. And like the brother in Burkina Faso, I'm loving the way he's moving right now. And this is some of the kind of thinking that many more of the leaders within Africa need to start to begin to think, so that we control our resources, that if we are going to enhance them or add value to them, let's add value to them in our territory and then sell it and distribute it wherever. Why should we have to continue to allow them to come in and extract the raw materials, make whatever it is, and then sell it back to us? No, if you're going to come, bring enough money to extract and to process right here on site. And then if anything, we do the export. And so we have to start to have leaders who think like that and not just continue to get money for campaign funding and to stay in power, because we have a lot of leaders who focus more like that. They don't necessarily look at the benefits, the long-term benefits for the people, but they look at how they can enrich themselves and their colleagues and their, supporters.
That is where we are going. Just now we'll be talking about agriculture. It is important. But I just want to point out that every time you have these high academians, particularly coming from the West, to tell us in Africa how our food should function, we should look them in the eyes and tell them that they are lying. This is why. This is how you are going to know. If truly the African traditional medicine is not good because it doesn't have the proper measurement, for this you do not know whether the amount you take is going to be harmful to you, which is actually the case in every other thing. I'm going to give an example of that. Then, for them to help you, if they really want to help you, they should have come with the instrument to measure it so that you will continue to use the medicine, because the medicine works. There is no argument whether or not the medicine works. What they are saying is that whether it can be risky sometimes because you cannot properly measure it, like you will take a tablet of chloroquine or paracetamol. For this reason, this is the case, okay? Right. That is the problem. What is the solution? The solution usually from there is to throw it away and take Western medicine. The traditional medicine is bad. This is how to know that they are lying. Now, this is another lie that they do. This is done mostly by the missionaries. They go to Africa and they tell the African people that the God that they are worshiping through the shrine are evil. So throw them away and embrace Jesus. But do you know what happened to those, the thing they call idol? Do you know what happened to them? I'm asking you, African, do you know what happened to them? They use it to build up British Museum. Vatican Museum is full of African artifacts. Vatican Museum. There are a lot of small, in the city where I am, for example, that is what is known as African Museum. In France, Germany, United States, Canada, UK are full of African artifacts. Now, this is a question for you Africans. They told you that these things were evil. But how did they manage to take evil to their land? That is to know that they are lying to you. If somebody comes from the outside and tell you that they know what is right for you, you need to let the person prove it. They cannot prove it because they don't know. So let's help ourselves. Let's tell ourselves the truth. They are not there for you. They are there only for the money. The money. If what it takes is for one person to lie against the other one and for that you are fighting, that is perfectly fine. In 2015, I did a documentary which I titled Pan-Africanism, Testing Idea on Reality. So what I was saying in the thesis basically was, let's take the beautiful idea of Pan-Africanism, let's put it side by side with what is happening in Africa. Let's see how it squares out. It doesn't square out. Now, one of the arguments there is that we take a look, for example, as because we didn't just talk about the Pan-Africanism, we talk about Pan-Africanism side by side with the conflict in Africa. And what is the founding? What we find is that most of the conflicts that have been taking place in Africa, whether you are looking at the war in Sierra Leone, the war in Liberia, the civil war in Nigeria, the massacre in Rwanda, these fights have never been African fights. These are fights that have been fought for the interest of other people. But the real player actually are the African people, the real victim. And they are, of course, they are the same people that are shooting. But the question is, do you know how that war was orchestrated? How you know how the war is orchestrated is who benefit from the war. For example, in Nigeria, we fought for 3 years where more than 2 million people in Nigeria died. If that war was for the interest of the Nigerian people, this is what will happen. On the street of Nigeria, we have monument of the heroes of the war. But in Nigeria, we don't have heroes of the war. We have that the shadows of that war continue to torment Nigeria till today. But I want to remind you that Nigeria is not the only place that people fight war. In the United States, people have fought war. But if you go to the street of New York, in Chicago, you will see those monuments because they recognize that those people that died, they didn't die for nothing. They died for something. Therefore, their blood will be a salvation for the country. What is the blood of over 2 million Nigerians? What are they for? They say it's true in Sierra Leone, in Rwanda. I think as Africa, we need to take the time to look beyond the big picture. Let's take the time to piece it together, understand the story, how they are constructed. Then we can begin to understand whether we first deconstruct it, then know whether we want to recompose it that way or change the rules. Anyway, that is by the way. Now let's come back to cannabis as we move into agriculture. What really are some of the medicinal benefits? What are the advantages of cannabis? Then we move more deeper into agriculture. Please share with me.
Cannabis has, like I said, a number of uses. From the medicinal side, it is you have asthma, you have glaucoma, you have a number of other ailments that is attributed to cannabis, and that is why right now here in America it's widely used as a medicine. It's prescribed by doctors. It's prescribed by for many different issues, sleeping disorders, stress, all kind of different things. People get it prescribed for. So there's no doubt. Absolutely, in terms of the medicinal benefits. There are nutritional benefits. There are benefits for the textile industry and the cosmetic industry, as a number of folks presently are using it to make soaps and shampoos and stuff like that. And so there's huge possibilities where cannabis is concerned. So in the agricultural sector, cannabis alone creates an entire industry for itself and can be used to also enhance and add more value to a lot more products that are not as valuable. So, for example, if you were to just sell, let's say, lemonade, but if you were to sell infused lemonade, lemonade infused with cannabis, the price of the lemonade would increase significantly. So there is a lot of scope for development and advancement in agriculture if we're supposed to zoom in on the cannabis industry. And it is very helpful also in helping others to see the possibilities of adding value to some of the things that they utilize in agriculture on a normal basis, but don't necessarily think of adding value to.
You see, before I was saying something to the effect of the loan that was taken by Nigeria, the offspring of 1991, when the Gulf War was going on. Because why I made mention of the Gulf War, because of course that was the period, is that Nigeria being an oil-producing country, and in the period of Gulf War, meaning that the Gulf people, which of course are also very good, very high in production, were not producing oil because they were fighting. It would mean that Nigeria was in wealth, no? But that is the same time that they are going to borrow money. It doesn't square. It doesn't make any sense. But the evidence of that actually is that in Nigeria, in 1999, that was when we returned to democracy. Now, of course, people begin to ask more questions. It's not really that, because it's not even clear in Nigeria whether the democracy is better or the military is better. Because the democracy that we have entered since 1999 has basically crumbled Nigeria. The people, these are no longer military, these are civilian, but they are so bankrupt that the country is now almost crawling. It cannot even crawl anymore. Nigeria has become a shambles. But anyway, just for the purpose of the argument. So for that law, the consequence of the law really, and a combination of many other like that, respect in a way for us to respond to the conditions, is that 1999, we realized that millions, if not billions of naira were used to import toothpick into Nigeria. Okay, I want to repeat that because people didn't hear me. I mean, millions, if not billions of naira were used annually to import toothpick into Nigeria. Okay, now let's for the sake of argument, let's use our brain for the first time. Let's think. Nigeria is in a tropical region of the world, which means there are a lot of trees, no?
Trees, yes.
Okay, toothpick is not produced in the laboratory. They are trees. They are product of plants. What will it take from the Nigerian government to set up industry that produce toothpick to feed only? I'm not saying export, but only to supply to the country. These are some of the things in that they are doing these things. I don't even understand the rationale behind it. The economy is open, but open for who? For what?
Open for the foreign investors to come in and to benefit and to give them their little, change under the table and, keep their party going and make sure that they're okay. And they're okay as far as they're concerned. The country is doing good. That's what they would say. Some of these things, I love to listen and learn about some of these things because it also strengthens my point that in a lot of the cases, we share very similar experiences in the Caribbean, even though we were taken away, or many of us were taken away, or are not on the mainland. The governance structures that are in place still are like the hallmarks of the evidence of the colonialism and imperial rule, because they left physically in the sense that you're not seeing the European faces sitting in the seats. However, their systems remain intact. So the Westminster governance structure, for example, on St. Kitts and Nevis is still very evident. So all that happened is that you don't have the persons, the Caucasian person sitting in the seats, but you have people who come from amongst you who are sitting in those seats representing those systems and the tenets of those systems, and they do whatever is required to maintain those systems. So you have to realize that it is not so much our people per se, but the indoctrination of the system that they seek to govern or to maintain. And until we, the masses, who, when they get into these positions, they make it their business to continue to divide and rule and conquer. And until we realize that it's a game, right? And we need to empower ourselves and get to that point where we recognize what they are doing and take our power back to do what we need to do, in some cases ourselves, we are going to continue to have these things because our leaders are still controlled to some extent. It is like Lucky Dube put it one time in a song. He said, it's a Mickey Mouse freedom. It's a Mickey Mouse independence. And it's what we're seeing. I mean, for me, I see it and this is something that I speak about openly in my territory. We have inherited independence, so to speak. We were independent since 1983 on St. Kitts and Nevis, right? 1983. After independence, we were not given any money or anything from Britain. We had to build our own societies and communities from the taxes of the people who lived in the society and the community. And in 2024, we're here in 2024, And we still continue with the Westminster governing structure. We still continue with the governing system of the plantocracy that maintains. We have independence, but the Governor General, who is the King's representative, is still the head of state. And we, the taxpayers, are paying to have a symbolic representation of who you are supposed to be freed from. So this is when you have to deal with these things, and when you have to point out these things, that's why they say the word Rasta crazy, because Rasta man fighting against this system, because these are things that we see and we point out. So like me, I have always said that I don't think I would ever be a prime minister or a president, because I personally would never pay allegiance to King Charles III, his heirs and his successors. And this is what these guys who are elected do without even flinching. They take up the King James Version of the Bible and say, I pay allegiance to King Charles III, his heirs and his successors. And that statement in essence is so deep. Just when you make that statement, you listen to that carefully, you are paying allegiance to King Charles III, his heirs and successors. So what you're saying, even though you are independent, you are still paying allegiance to him. And if he's not there, whichever member of his family, because his heirs are his family, so whichever member of his family takes up that position, you're still paying allegiance to them. And if it's not a family member, it's just somebody who succeeds him, you're still paying allegiance to them. So are you really independent?
That is a question. That is a question.
So that's why I said, you know, as Lucky Dube puts it in his song, Mickey Mouse Freedom. Lucky Dube had a song, you know, Lucky Dube, the South African reggae superstar.
Absolutely.
He said, he had a song, he said, Mickey Mouse Freedom, yeah. You know, and it's like, that's what we're seeing living out.
Unfortunately. All right, now let's talk a bit about your agricultural practices. Yesterday, for example, in our conversation, I was moderating a room, an international conversation about people of African descent. It was an interesting one, actually. Then I was saying that maybe we need to look for a way to collaborate with the local people, with the real people, because the people are actually the power. It is not just the government. The people are what makes the difference. If we can manage to collaborate with the people, then the people might help us to find our way around, because the people are the power. Now, tell me, what is your strongest motivation in your agricultural practices? Because, of course, in our pre-interview conversation, you did tell me how you are approaching your agriculture, which I find to be really very interesting. So we are on that now. So tell me a bit about your approach to agriculture and what is motivating you in it.
Agriculture for me is, for me, first and foremost, I recognize that, you know, in order for us to survive, and not just survive, but thrive effectively, we have to eat properly. And as I analyze life, I look at the fact that, like, plants are like our brothers and sisters in every shape or form. Let's look at the basic of a plant, right? A plant actually uses carbon dioxide to make food, and the food that they make is the food that we eat, right? And the end result of them utilizing the carbon dioxide to make food, they give off oxygen, which is what we breathe in order to live and to give off the carbon dioxide that the plants need. So we are, like, technically, like, we are one, you know, like, we are very symbiotic in that relationship. And then you find from the plant, we get clothing, you know, cotton, we get housing, you know, the wood to make your house and your chair and your furniture and all that. You get food to sustain you. You get oils, which are essential for the body. You get medicine, which is to help to heal you. So, you know, like, we've got everything that we really need coming from plants. So, you know, I pretty early in my life. Like I told you, like I said in the discussion earlier, my parents, both my parents, my mom was more into the ornamentals, but my dad, he always had a garden, always growing. So we had, my yard right now in the Caribbean, my yard is like a forest, like a dense orchard, all kind of trees. So I grew up, my father had, so we grew up growing sweet potatoes, dasheen, yams, peas, we got bananas, sugar cane, orange, limes, sugar apple, custard apple, jackfruit, breadfruit, bread nut, guineps, so, and this is just in my yard. I didn't have to leave my yard to get these things. So, and then the community, would have had a lot of these things in the area and so on. But I had this, around me growing up. Though I had those, and though he did that, I don't know if you would have had the same experience too. But our parents, I guess there was that still slavery sentimentality that's attached to, agriculture and farming and so on. And so it was never something that, even though they practiced it, it wasn't something that they were motivated to tell us to take it on as a business. It was more subsistence, right? And parents then look to, wanting your children to become doctors and lawyers and teachers and so on. So they want to encourage you to go to school and, so that you don't come out to do this hard work and dirty work. And that's how it was seen and how it is seen. However, along the way, I still got attracted to planting food. And again, back to the introduction to Rastafari life, I began paying more attention to food and what I eat, and recognizing that you are what you eat. And it made me also begin to pay attention to some of the things that were being done to what we deem as food, how processed it was. And in studying processing, I began to realize that the more processed the things get, the more nutrition is lost. And so it is actually of not much nutritional value. And so I began to zoom in on a lot of, those things, which motivated me to first begin to grow most of what I need to eat so that I can then be more healthy and live more healthy and longer, and not necessarily be tapped into all of this processed food. And then as I realized more people were becoming, into eating a lot more of this processed food, I found that it would be really critical for me as an individual to push towards helping to feed not just myself, but to feed as many as possible. So I embarked on that journey. So I started my little garden back home with my parents, and then when I started teaching, I started at the primary school level. When I was at the primary school level, the agriculture is not necessarily on the curriculum. It is a bit of it we start within the science, and the science approach in the primary school is more integrated, science approach, where you just learn about a lot of different things, animals, insects and creatures, and you learn a little science theory and so on, but agriculture would have been a part of it. However, the primary school I taught at first, the first primary school I taught at St. Thomas's Primary School on Nevis, I embarked on a little tire farm project. So I got some old used car tires, and I cut them in two, and utilize them, put dirt in it and so on, and utilize them. I had my children be a part of this little garden. The school had a kitchen, a little cafeteria where they fed lunch to the children and so on. And so we got to a point where we used to supply the kitchen with a little bit of tomatoes and peppers and so on. And the children were very much inspired by it, and even some of the teachers and so on. So out of that, it kind of helped me to cement that this is something that I really need to do. I really need to seek to encourage a lot more the youths to have a different approach or see agriculture from a different perspective. So I eventually got assistance from the Taiwanese. There's a Taiwanese delegation that is, because St. Kitts has diplomatic ties with Taiwan, and so as a result, there is, a delegation that is on island and so on. So they heard about what I was doing, and they sponsored some tools and fencing wire and all that. And so we expanded. We set up a whole different area now and got more of the school children involved and so on. As a result of that, and my interest in agriculture, even though it was not a part of the curriculum, it was seen by the administration and by the Ministry of Education. And at that point, they needed an agricultural science teacher for the secondary school system. I was trained as a teacher for the primary school system, but not necessarily for the secondary. However, they needed the teacher, and I was asked to take on the challenge, which I did. And I guess the rest was history, because I got there and the principal told me straight up, when they get good people, they don't, allow them, they don't really let them leave. And so he'll do whatever to make sure that I stick around. So then I got into teaching it at the secondary level, and that inspired me a bit more and taught me a bit more as well too, because now it would have been a different curriculum at a higher level, and I would have had to master the information in order to teach it. So I had to myself started to get more into, the practices and some of the things that I've done. And as I am doing this, I am realizing, man, there's a lot of things that I take for granted. And then there's a lot of areas that I initially never even consider or think as agriculture, and even see how agriculture connects to some of these various other industries. And so it really sent off a whole different, trigger in my mind, just going through the material and learning the material to impart it to the students. And then I continued doing this, and in doing it, the school I was at, they didn't have a physical farm either. So I found a very serious challenge for me. I was like, in doing this, I realized that this subject is really a practical subject. Even though there's a theory, for me, it doesn't make a lot of sense to teach a theory without applying the practical. So then I started to, communicate with other farmers that were close to the school and see if I could develop a relationship that they could allow me to bring the students to visit their farm and do some work on it and so on. So I had two persons in the community who did that, and we were able to get a bit of that done. But while we were doing that at the same time, because I'm learning from the farmers firsthand as well, right, the firsthand experience, and I'm doing this with the children, and I'm doing the theory as well, and I'm realizing that a lot of these young children, in some cases, they loved it, but at the same time were very ignorant to it, right? And even the things that, I guess maybe I was at a bias because I grew up doing certain things, like with my parents and so on, so I was familiar with certain plants and so on. But then I realized simple things that they should know, living on an island, and they were not. So it showed how disconnected they were to matching the plant to the fruit itself. Like, for example, I remember I was planting some sweet potato vines, and I was asking the children if they could identify it, and they couldn't. And I was like, really? And then I said, it's sweet potato. And they were like, they've never seen the plant. They've only seen the potato itself. But in terms of matching it, So those things kind of, pushed me to really recognize that I really need to take this a bit more seriously. After teaching for a number of years and mastering the curriculum and getting an opportunity to have most of my students, having successful 100% pass rates, I kind of reached to a point where I thought, okay, I am influencing the youth, but based on what's happening in the industry, I think I still need to play a bigger role. So I was seeking to get into the Ministry of Agriculture where I could make an impact on the nation now. Well, at that time, they were not too friendly with that idea. They preferred me to stay in the school, but I was at a point where I felt the need to do something else. So during that time, an opportunity came up on the Sister Island and St. Kitts to manage a 400-acre farm-to-table hotel. And so I was responsible for the farm side of it. Very good opportunity, which I took up on. And that, again, kind of gave me another eye-opener in terms of where we could take this agricultural industry and the forward kind of thinking approach that is necessary for its success. One of the things that impressed me about that opportunity was the fact that, based on my interview with the manager at that time, the director of the project, his philosophy was this was a farm with a hotel and rooms nestled in between it. So it was a whole reverse psychology concept, which, many of the people even on the site really couldn't understand. So I functioned mainly as king on the property, because I only answered to the general manager per se, because nobody else really could have understood our language and our vision, So the setting, another part of the setting was, in terms of the menu, that was really interesting. The chef did not dictate the menu. The menu was dictated by what I harvested and take to the chef. So we had the farm on site and property. Then I come in, I harvest, I weigh, and I take to the chef. And then based on what is provided to him, then he makes his menu. Now, usually in a hotel, it's the other way around. The chef will say, hey, I'm going to cook this today, and we need these ingredients, right? And so that in itself, and the concept that they had, where also they made a declaration that they're not going to import anything. So they start to buy either from the local farmers, backyard gardeners, by whatever means, to get whatever it is to put on the table. So if they didn't grow it on their farm, they would go to the local farmers and so on. So the money stayed within the community, or at least within the region. The farthest they determined to go was, if a boat comes in from another Caribbean island, they would probably take, as long as it's locally grown. And that meant a lot. So you see the kind of mindset where you're seeking to ensure that the community and everybody benefit as a result of this agricultural revolution. Eventually, even the governments and many people, I think the vision was ahead of the times of many, even though now I am seeing and hearing a lot more people are really trying to see how they can do things like this, because it is really a vital thing to do. So that pushed me on a quest to seek to make this a reality. So this is one of the things that I am seeking to do at this point, to replicate that kind of community setting, an agro-based, business-oriented community, set of communities like around the globe. So that's one of the things. So at this point, what I've done, I have started to demonstrate the extension of agriculture by zooming in on the fact, like I pointed out earlier, that we need to focus on not just growing the raw materials, but actually processing them into value added and making the extra monies ourselves, instead of just growing the raw material and sending it to somebody to make it, to send it back to us to buy it from them. And so that is part of my journey at present. So I am at this point right now on a 5-acre plot where I grow a wide array of different things and make value-added products. So I sell to farmers markets the fresh produce, and to customers who drive along the farm, because I'm creating a live super farmers market as well with that. So I'm creating the opportunity for folks to come in, walk through the farm. So I'm going to label most of the stuff that's grown, the herbs and the different, because I find that that is part of the issue as well. Like I said, in terms of that, making the connection. Here in the US, you find a lot of people, they go to the supermarkets and they see this stuff in the supermarkets, but it can't match the fruit or the veggie to the plant or the tree. So I want to be able to create that environment, like a learning situation. And, you can come and see it and help to harvest it and have that experience. When I was at that project, I realized how important that was when visitors came and I did the farm tour. I did a farm tour and a nursery tour and pointed out the different plants and how they're used and stuff like that. And that helped me to realize how ignorant a lot of people were towards what they eat. So that is something that I am here pushing at this point. So I have developed a number of products. We have gotten to the point where they're USDA approved, certified, and they're sold online globally. So that took me some time in terms of getting to that point, and some money as well. But at the same time, it's making me realize that these are things that we need to focus on. We need to not just talk about these things. And that's one of the reasons why, even though it has cost me and it's a journey and it's a struggle, I'm struggling to make it a reality, so that, because to me, in some cases, I find in expressing the vision, explaining the vision, most people still see the risks, and as a result don't necessarily want to invest in the risk. But if they see you make it happen, then it helps to strengthen somebody else to say, but if he could do it, then I could do it too, right? So that's part of the journey. And so that's why what I am hoping as I continue is, like I'm saying, to be able to replicate some of these things in different places. So I can come to a community in Africa and set up a farm with the agro processing side of it, So it's a concept where I am approaching it as beginning with the end in mind. I think there's some one of those motivational speakers that I listen to. They have that concept where you begin with the end in mind. And I say begin with the end in mind because, for example, this is the approach I want to take. So if I come and I'm going to set up a farm that is going to grow sorrel or hibiscus, I don't know what you all call it over there. It's a red plant. It's a part of the hibiscus family. I think it's in Jamaica. It's very popularly known, in St. Kitts and Nevis, as sorrel. We make a drink with it that usually around Christmas. The red. In some places they call it Jamaica. I know the Asian call it hibiscus. Right. Okay. So if you use that. Now you grow that, you can sell it to make the drink raw like that, or you could dry it, right, and package it because it can be sold dried. You can, make jams from it. You can make wine from it, and you can actually even make a rum from it. So what I'm saying, when you set up and you're going to grow, you set your mind to actually process one or two of these value-added products. So you're growing sorrel, you have 1 or 3 or 4 farmers that's connected with you. They don't have to worry, because even if you don't get the raw material sold on the market, you have already set yourself to process it. So as much as you bring in, okay, if it's not sold, then you just dry it and you either package it or you make jams or you make something with it. And then these products you can sell, because people are going to be selling these things back to you. So that's the kind of concept. You're making you're growing apples, think of something that you can do to create, value from what you're growing. You're growing bell peppers and onions and so on. Okay, maybe you can make a green seasoning and you bottle that and you package it, and then you grow all the ingredients just to process that specific product. So it's along that kind of thinking that I think most of our people need to begin to think. That's where we need to begin to think, so that we don't just give away our labor. Because I think, for example, if you use the sorrel or the hibiscus example, the farmer that grows his sorry, he might get, let's say, this is a dollar figure. He may get $2 a pound for the raw sorrel like that. But if he dries it and package it, he can use a fraction of what he gets. Let's say a pound. Let's say he uses a pound. In that package, no, that package might be a pound for $5 or $10 versus just getting $2. The jam, by adding some sugar and cooking it and whatever, you end up creating a product that you might get, $4 or $5 for. So the value of it and the return to the farmer would be much greater if he opts to add value to the product. And then it also adds a longer shelf life. So whereas if it's not sold right away fresh, you run the risk of losing it and probably having to just use it as compost. Whereas when you process it, you have a longer shelf life and an opportunity to gain greater value as well, greater returns.
That's so good. That's so good. That secondary production, I think that is where a lot of people should really pay more attention because, it's usually the case that people go into the agriculture, they produce the final product, even the one that they are calling the cash crop. They don't really aim much from the cash crop, in that the food, the crop are produced, they are harvested, they are exported like that without taking it to the secondary stage. Because it is actually in the secondary stage that you create the job opportunity, because now you learn the skill on how to transform it into a variety of other products. But if you are just exporting it as a raw material, then you only have one product. So
and you only have one skill too. The farmer will just be a very good farmer. Whereas now, for example, let's say avocado. If you get into now extracting the oils from avocado, then you have a whole industry that's created where these people now would have to learn how to operate the machinery, how to maintain them, how to repair them. And so you will have that's at least 3 different skills that would be coming out of that. And then you'll have the people now who will be able to package and label and learning how to use those machinery and printing and the whole works, right? And that's a whole other industry there. And then the avocado oil is going to be of a much higher value than just the avocado by itself, So these are things that we really have to zoom in on. Value added is going to be key for the agro industry. Value added, and as my professor friend, Dr. Aikiche, always promotes, the brain re-engineering, because we have to re-educate our people. So a lot is going to have to be done in terms of the re-education for us to start to see agriculture as not a subsistence, but as a business. So we can develop agripreneurs. So when you start to cultivate, you don't just see, I'm just trying to make some money to sustain my family and so on. You start to actually pay attention to the business. Okay, I spent this. I'm going to need this to, invest in that. I need to put that. And then now let's start to see okay, I anticipate based on your projections, put in your little business plans and so on. So there might be scope for training some of the farmers to accept that. It might be a bit of a challenge because, it's very tough, especially when it's the older farmers. It's always, they say it's hard to teach an old dog new tricks. But if they are maybe challenging, you might be able to find a younger member in the family who might be able to take care of that aspect for them or help them in that regards. But it is going to be important that they do understand it as a business and thus be able to benefit from it more efficiently, work more efficiently and benefit more efficiently.
Talking about the secondary production, which is where we are going to be able to develop a lot of skills, and finally, people in the Ivory Coast should not export the raw cocoa to France, but it's produce processes in Ivory Coast and see if the Ivorian will like the cocoa product. But I'm sure they are going to like it. If they don't like it, but they're going to like the skill, because the skill they are going to get, the processing cocoa, is going to be used for other areas. You see, I actually made this argument in 2010, because in 2010, I wrote a book that I titled "On the Development in Africa, My Hands Are Clean." So the topic, the thesis of the book was, let's see what our responsibility is in what is happening to us. It's not enough to just blame other people, but as a person, as an African, where is our responsibility? So there, I was saying, we don't need to export our material just to Europe like that. Maybe that is what they want. Yes, but what do I want too? I'm a human being too. What is my role? What is my role here? Because if we do that, I was saying, of course, making reference also to Thomas Sankara, because that would be one of his biggest ideas, that we should eat what we produce and produce what we eat. Let's start from there. Then we can talk about later how we can also help other people in the world. Because now I'm thinking that the skill is more important. In that, if, like I was saying in the book, no, the only thing that we can get is extracting copper and exporting copper. The only skill we are going to ever get is to extract. That's all. But if we can think of transforming that copper now into different things, maybe producing wire, then we have a lot of skill. But maybe the market of copper has finished. Our skill can help us in other things. We can extract other things because we know how to do it. I think what we need is the know-how. How do we transform? You see, Nigeria is the largest producer of cassava in the world. What is cassava? Somebody might ask. Cassava can be used in any type of thing, from producing bread to flour to pounded yam. In Africa, in Nigeria, we are very, very fond of that. But I'm saying cassava, if you no longer need cassava, for example, you can take care of yam, because yam is also a tuber. If you know how to transform cassava very well, that should move you to also learning how to process also yam. If you learn the skill, it can help you in a variety of ways. But if what we get is just taking the cassava, then selling it somewhere, but we're never going to grow like that. But this is my question. The infrastructure, how do we go about that? Because I think this is sometimes bigger than what an individual poor farmer can afford. How do we go about this infrastructure?
So that's why one of my things right now, and some of my posts on LinkedIn and so on would reflect that one of my arguments is right now, we have loads of millionaires and billionaires in Africa, right? However, seemingly most of them are caught up in that same Eurocentric mindset. So then they get millions and billions, but instead of reinvesting back in the community and the society and seek to develop some of these areas that we know are critical, it's more about the show. Let's see who have the biggest house and who have the most fancy cars, who can have 50 cars parked up in front of their houses, and who can wear, the latest Nike Jordans and the latest Gucci and whatever the other name brand clothes are and stuff like that. And it's just about that. So you find the brain wash, like I said, the brain bleaching is really taking effect. If we are to be successful, a lot of these persons also who are in authority, even on the government side, should put their monies where the mouth is. You would find that a lot of cases, they have a lot of fancy speeches and very eloquent speeches when it comes to agriculture. And it sounds very good. And it's really, exciting to the farmers when it's time, when it's convenient, whether it's, World Food Day or whatever they're promoting, they would come with some very nice fancy speeches. But then when they go into the house to read the budget, does the budget reflects what they were just talking about? So until we start to see the monies, because yes, in order to do these things that you talk about, the infrastructure is going to be necessary, because if you're going to extract the oils from avocado, you're going to need the machinery to extract the oil and the machinery to bottle it and label it and all of that. So that sort of thinking has to be in the mindset so that we could have those sorts of investments. So we need to be able to have those investments made available. There is the argument, and we need to get beyond this, and that's one of the things I think probably we need to focus on, getting an agricultural bank. Maybe most countries need to have a bank set aside, some sort of funding set aside to invest in these things, because you find that most banking institutions argue that farming is a risky business and they don't want to, invest in some of these farm projects. But when I look at it, I say, these people are planning to go to Mars. They're planning to go to the moon, right? And we see people are lining up with millions and billions to invest in these things, but that is more risky. Every day you see these rockets falling back and so on, but then they still find monies to reinvest in making these quests. So are they really and truly serious about making these things a priority? They find millions to support wars. They find millions and billions to invest in weapons of mass destruction. Those are risky ventures, but it's too risky for agriculture to invest these millions that is necessary to deal with food security. And even these people who are going to Mars, and even these people who are making these weapons, in order for them to survive, they need food. So sometimes I really try to analyze the scenario. So like I said, that is what we need though. We need, in order for that, what you ask in terms of the infrastructure and for us to do these things, we need the finance. So I don't think we lack people with the technical expertise. I don't think we lack the farmers with the ability to produce. I think we just at this point lack, in terms of us as a people, well, organization to some extent, and the finance. So we need the finance, and then we need to be organized so that we have a plan from, like I said, beginning with the end in mind. So you start having the farmers make sure they have all that they need, and then the next stage, you have the equipment and so on that is necessary for the processing, and then the next stage, you have yourself prepared with the marketing persons who are now going to be able to move these products after being produced to whether it's the local stores, local supermarkets, local shops, or if you need to export, get your market connection so that by the time you have your things packaged and boxed and the container, you get them on the ships or planes or wherever you need to get them to the next location. That is what we need. But the finance is going to be critical, and we need to invest in ourselves more. Yes, we sometimes, and that's why we have some of the problems as well, and that's why I kind of focus on looking at the African billionaires and millionaires and investors, because though we need funding, sometimes when we do get the funding from outside, it comes with various conditions. Like, for example, when you were pointing out, there was a case in Jamaica where I think IMF loaned Jamaica some monies in regards to dealing with some of their farming issues, but the conditions were that they now have to open up the market. So they will get the money, but they have to open up the market. So you had a scenario where you get the money to increase your potato production, right? I remember looking at the documentary. There was a documentary called Life and Debt in Jamaica. Debt as in DEBT, Life and Debt in Jamaica. And it pointed out where some of the farmers, right? They were told, okay, improve your meat production and so on. But then the companies on the island that would take meat, the KFC and the Burger King or whatever, they found all kind of excuses when it's time to accept the meat. Oh, it doesn't meet the standard. Oh, it does, so that they could bring in that from overseas. Then you had a case where they told them to improve their milk production, so the farmers with the cows and so on. And then because they opened up the market, they were allowed to bring in powdered milk. And then you had a case where a lot of the farmers were getting the milk, but then they had to throw away the milk because these powdered milk were competing with the local farmers and so on. So some of these things, to combat some of these things, that's why we need to now invest in each other so that we don't have those conditions. So you lend the money and then you get back your money and we get to do what we need to do. But when you have to depend on outside investment, sometimes these are some of the scenarios that you get because you get the monies with conditions. So an IMF is very, very much known for that they would give some of these smaller countries monies, but with conditions that would keep them sort of dependent, because that is how they succeed as well. They want us and want you to always be dependent. They don't really want you to be on your own and not having to depend on them. And so until we have leaders, it's like we have to be realistic, my brother. Like, you think the oppressor is going to teach you so that you can learn to oppress them, to master them? No. So they're going to do whatever it takes to kind of keep you, as long as they can keep you in that scenario that you don't wake up and don't realize. They're going to do it as long as they possibly can.
That is where I actually think that we need to open up our eyes more. Because when the Europeans said they brought salvation to Africa, we should know that they are putting us in cage. Because nobody wants to save another person. Why would they come to save you after taking out millions of people on the land that will serve there in America? Now they have come to save the other. Well, who does that? Are they stupid? They don't bring any salvation to African people. They talk about education. Education. Do you know what education means? It means weaponizing you. Why would they weaponize you to kill them? It doesn't happen. So we need to suspect everything. Everything that is coming from Europe. Okay, from Europe, I'm not necessarily saying every European citizen. I'm talking of the European strategic geopolitics. Because when they are coming, they have a plan, a very strategic plan of what they want to do. When they say they brought education, be careful of that kind of education. Because if that is all you get, you are going to become a danger to yourself. You are going to learn how to unlearn so that you can learn again. So when they say they want to give you money, they want to give you money. But be careful for that kind of money, because when they come to get that money back, they might get you along with it. So be careful. Yep. So the best investment you are saying is for us to invest on ourselves, because that is the only investment that can really stay with us. Any other time is, okay, you see, I was complaining of the opening up of the market that IMF promised Nigeria. You are saying the same thing in Jamaica, no? Because they know that the country that they are telling open up your market have nothing to put in the market. So opening up for who?
Exactly. So who will benefit from that?
That is the
point.
They
will, because their products and their things are going to come in and sell, but you have nothing to sell them. So that's the whole thing. Their idea behind that is for you to be consumers, continue to be consumers. And until you start to take that approach and say, I need to begin to be producers and produce and put on the market, then you're going to continue find yourself in that situation where they will play that game and continue to manipulate.
Thank you so much for that. All right, we have spent a good number of time. Of course, I have a lot of questions I would have asked you but for the sake of time, maybe we'll come back here again, because we didn't even talk about Marcus Garvey here. There are other things I would have asked you, but for time's sake, we'll come back again. So how can people find you, those who want to learn more about you?
Well, I'm on most of the social media platforms. I'm on YouTube, I'm on Facebook, I'm on LinkedIn. Yahsonn Tafari, that's my name. In terms of the business, you can find the website for the products, allnaturalboostersusa.com. That's one word, allnaturalboostersusa.com. So if you're looking for any of the products, you can check out that website. The farm in California is called Mellow Farms. And if you were to look up Mellow Farms, it will be the first thing on your Google search engine. I give thanks for that we're really up there. It's spelled differently. So let me give the spelling. It's Melloh. So that's Mellow, Melloh. And the farms is Pharmz. Pharmz, like pharmacy. So it's Mellow Farms. And you will find us on Facebook, Mellow Farms, and also Mellow Farms Organic Roadside Stall, because we have the roadside stall at the road here, and that's where we entertain that exchange with folks who stop by and get to come in and see what we're doing, and I get to share the experience with a lot of folks who stop by. So that is part of what I do. I am grateful, even though we didn't get to talk about Marcus Garvey per se. I am grateful that we got a chance to do this interview or this session during this month, as this month is known as Al Kebolana African History Month. I seek to not to make use of this black thing, because, I think, black is one of the things that they use. All of these are things that they use to still try to discredit us because, they say we're black and then they put everything as black is bad, Black Friday, black this, everything that is negative, they try to, though your sins be as scarlet, they may be as white as snow, like all of these things to try to. So I find people tend to not want to accept their African or Al-Kabelan heritage. The Europeans, it doesn't matter where they're from, they still accept the European, heritage. They're not afraid to, they love the idea of being categorized as being white, I guess, because of the attributes to white that makes them feel, in that way. But I am more prone to accept my African or Al-Kabelan heritage. And so, seeing that it's African History Month, I am grateful that I got the opportunity to share this experience on this month. And I really think that we don't need to continue to have these sorts of engagements and discussions. I think you're doing a great job in terms of getting people to tell their story and share their story. I am grateful for the opportunity to be on this platform. And I do look forward to being back again with, maybe something else that is of interest along that topic. I don't mind sharing the story, and I don't mind sharing my story, and I don't mind getting people to start to think more, especially about living naturally and eating organic food, and getting some more of our investors who might hear this session begin to really think more about investing in farmers and also investing in the Caribbean as well, making that connection, because that's one of the things that I really want to do as well. I want to really help to develop that or strengthen. I think it's there to some extent, but I really hope that we can strengthen that relationship between Africa and the Caribbean. There's a lot that we need to do together as a people. And I think the Caribbean, even though to some extent we were indoctrinated bad in regards to Africa, because the media generally in the past, except for now that we are seeing a lot more of these Nigerian movies and African movies and so on, and showing Africa in a different light. The past images would have been, people starving and hungry, and these are what they would want to show you in Africa to help you to encourage that kind of stigma to say, oh, we don't want to go over there, that's not a place you want to visit, and things like that. So there's a lot that we would need to do from the African side to help to dispel that kind of notion, and also us in the Caribbean being able to have that change of mind and develop, whether it's relationship within trade, education, tourism. These are areas that we can share with each other and collaborate with each other and expand and develop, our practices. And agriculture can also play a vital role in that, because I'm sure there's a lot of raw material also and produce that we can exchange and share with each other, because maybe we might be more advanced in some technologies and we might be able to help, instead of some of the things that are manufactured in the US and so on, we could be manufacturing them in the Caribbean or vice versa, and develop that kind of relationship. So I'm really looking forward to building that kind of relationship, and hopeful that out of this and many more sessions like this, that we can develop groups as we work along with Dr. Ike Che and many other influential persons in the industry to help to make some of these dreams a reality. That Caribbean Africa connection and that agro business communities that I would love to see, where we have agro-based communities around the world. So that is something that I really look forward to.
Absolutely. No, it's going to be a reality. It's an idea whose time have come. And we're going to make it a reality by putting on effort on that. And of course, it's not something that can be done by one person. It's something that is going to be done by all of us. Like I was telling you yesterday, I moderated a room that was mostly about business, but of African descent. People from Jamaica, from US, and from different parts of the world, from Europe. Our attention is looking towards Africa and how we can be able to make a contribution, give back to the situation there. And of course, in our company, A-Classes, we have a session that we are essentially dedicating to being able to be a bridge between African businesses and Western businesses. And of course, by Western businesses, we're also looking at people maybe who might be of African descent or even European. We don't have any problem with that. I don't think there is any problem having a European relationship, in African relationship in the area of business. What we are always stressing is that we don't want European or American businesses that are going there for the purpose of exploitation. Let's do business, you benefit, you will make money. Africa is the next frontier. In fact, it have always been a frontier, of course. I don't remember any time Africa was not important to the world. But now, with the population, with the resources, with technology, Africa is the next business opportunity. Come and make money, but don't exploit the people. Don't come for the purpose of cheating, as has always been the same for more than 400 years. What we are asking for, we want to be a bridge between African businesses and Western businesses. That is where we want to play a role. Our intention is to drive in billions of dollars to African businesses. So, but what we are against is for you to come and just take. You also need to come and invest. This is something that we really find very, very, very interesting. So we are going to push on it, continue to push on it. There are areas that some African businesses might need, maybe like in technology, infrastructure, in funding for some area. But we are not, people in Africa are not just sleeping on the ground. They are not just waiting for everything. They can also do something. There are something that they can also offer European or American businesses. That is for sure. There are people there that are really awake and ready to work. So we want to mesh the two. And we want to exchange a lot of resources, money, expertise in this middle. So this is where we are in for. Yeah.
That's one of the things. That's why I said I want to be able to create a model, right? So that model will have the training facility, educational center, so that the folks who go through that training at the end would be able now to have these skills that they could use when the plant is replicated in, let's say, in Africa or some other territory in Africa. Then they would be the ones who would be able now to train the others and teach the others, so that eventually, even though we may start off by bringing in outside folks to begin with, they would be training us so that we would be able now to then train ourselves. And then all we would need is to either buy the equipment or build the equipment ourselves, because we could get to that point in Africa as well, where we could build whatever equipment we may need to use to make our lives better. And so that is what we really need to zoom in on. And I'm with that 1,000,000%. I'm really hoping and looking forward to our brothers and sisters, seeing the need for us to do this and put agriculture on the pinnacle as it should be.
Iwe. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the time and the sharing and the contribution here. And like I said, of course, we are coming back again on the conversation relating to Marcus Garvey, because for me, it's very important. If I open our website for you, you see how many publications we have on that man, because he have a very huge influence on the African diaspora. And of course, our target here is the African diaspora. So it's natural that
not just the African diaspora, not just the African diaspora, and the world. When you look at a little man that came from a little island, and you look at the contribution that he has made, not just in America, but around the world. I mean, when you look at the time frame, sometimes it's kind of interesting, because when I look at history, I try to put the time frame in perspective and what was happening around that time. And to look at Marcus Garvey in America, I mean, leading millions of men. I mean, owning 3 huge ships that he was planning to trade with Africa and America and around the region. I mean, setting up UNIA branches almost all over the world. That was not an easy feat. I mean, it was not an easy feat. And to try to put that into context today, those three ships would be like, you know, 747 Boeing jets, you know what I mean? Like, you know, and it saddens me to some extent. You know, I know we're not going to get into it, but it saddens me to some extent that we would have had people like these who would have fought and struggled. I mean, and today it's like we have regressed. We are nowhere close to the kind of, you know what I mean, meditation.
We are coming back for this. We have an entire dedication to this argument.